The dots on this screen represent an adult life in months, assuming a life expectancy of 90. So if you're 18 years old right now, this is an optimistic estimate of the months that you have left. About a third of that time is going to be spent sleeping. 126 of those months will go to school and your career. About 18 will be spent driving, 36 cooking and eating, 36 doing chores and errands, and about 27 in the bathroom. So that leaves you with 334 months for everything else. How you spend this time is going to determine the quality of your life. Ask yourself, what do you want to do with that free time? The average 18-year-old in the United States is on pace to spend 93% of their remaining free time looking at a screen. So there is a stark difference between how much time we say our screens are worth and how much time we actually give them. And it is critical to realize it's a consequence of a business model that has incentives which are fundamentally misaligned with your well-being. These services are free because they are monetizing you. Their profit is directly linked to how long they can get you to scroll. While you were trying to avoid FOMO, you actually missed out on living.
Is the next generation losing their life to technology? Teens and young adults are not choosing to spend their time this way, but are being pulled by their devices constantly. And we already know that this constant pull from phones is increasing anxiety and depression, and our gut is once again taking another hit. Today, we're going to hear from Dino Ambrosi, the founder of Project Reboot, which is an intentional digital wellness program that helps students build intentional relationships with their devices. He has helped over 60,000 middle school, high school, and college students around the globe. He shares how we are still underestimating just how widespread this problem is, and students are crying out for help. I'm Norma Flood, and I'm an integrative and functional nutritionist. Welcome to Go With Your Gut. Welcome, Dino. Such an important conversation to have today. Thank you for being here. You know, what got my attention, the way I found you,
Mhm.
was on a TED Talk that you provided, and that's how we opened up the show. We had a little clip from that amazing TED Talk. It was titled "The Battle for Your Time: Exposing the Costs of Social Media." And you share shocking statistics of how adults or 18-year-olds spend their free time. Could you go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, just to cite the source on that data, there was a report that Common Sense Media came out with in 2021, and it looked at teen and tween tech use. For kids in the US from ages 13 to 18, how much total time are they spending consuming online entertainment? So, really important thing to highlight with that data, it does not count using technology for a productive purpose. None of it's related to school. It doesn't even count communication. It's really just time on social media, video games, watching TV, watching YouTube, things like this. And they found the average 13 to 18-year-old in the US was spending 8 hours and 39 minutes each day consuming non productive online entertainment. So the impetus for the talk was seeing that stat and me just thinking internally, like, wow, that's more time than you spend sleeping. And obviously, there's other obligations during the day. So if you add it all up, like, what percentage of their remaining free time are they on pace to spend? And that chart is the result of that exercise. So it's pretty shocking when you see it laid out in that way. And my hope is that that's not how an 18-year-old will actually spend their time. But according to that report, that is what they are on pace for, which is just shocking.
Well, I don't think any of us realize how much time we spend on our phones or screens. And I don't think we want to face it.
Yeah.
As you've mentioned before, that we think, oh, it's what teens want to do. They love doing this. But actually, when you talk to any of them, including my own kids, sometimes they're like, Mom, I wish I grew up in the 80s when we didn't have this constant pull coming at us. And I think they do try to take a break from their phones. And when they do, they feel left out of conversation, left out of social opportunities.
Yeah.
it's almost like you're literally hooked. What you're doing is you're providing a way that, yes, we need our technology to a certain degree, but how can we be more intentional about that time? But first, I'd like to hear what led you to where you're at today. Where did cell phone use or smartphone use start for you?
Yeah, well, I think I had a pretty interesting context here because I was truly in the first batch of guinea pigs for growing up with social media. Instagram came out when I was in 7th grade. So my friends and I, we were the very first ones to have social media sitting in our pockets going through middle school and high school.
What year was that?
That would have been in, I believe, 2011, 2012.
Around then. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually when you look at anxious generation and all the data that they cite about, teen mental health and all of these different trends, you typically see 2011, 2012 is really when things start to change. And that's when
Mm,
not only social media goes mainstream on smartphones, it's when it goes from it starts to transition from actually being a social tool to being more of an entertainment platform where the feeds are no longer just chronological. There's an algorithm deciding what you consume. And so it is worth taking a step back and noting that the first versions of these apps that I got on were very different from the apps as they exist today. They were more of a tool to support your social life, and they've over time transitioned into becoming more and more addictive as they've shifted from building an app for their users because their first goal was to get everyone on the platform to
right.
eventually building an app for advertisers because
Right.
once they had all of us there, they had the chance to start monetizing us. So it's changed in a pretty dramatic way, and I think the health of my relationship with my phone mirrored that shift. It wasn't actually really until I got into college that I would say this became a big issue. There were definitely periods where I spent probably too much time watching YouTube videos as a kid, but all in all, it didn't really interfere with my life too much, and I would say I actually had a lot of balance. But then I got to UC Berkeley for my freshman year of college, and it was just kind of this perfect storm of the technology getting more addictive, me having a lot more freedom and flexibility in my schedule. I mean, as a high school student and middle school student, so much of my time was spoken for, either being in school, going from class to class to class, or having extracurriculars and things outside of school hours that were commitments on my calendar. There were not very many hours of the week that I actually had to make decisions about. And then you go to college and that gets flipped on its head. And the vast majority of your time is open and up to you. And that increase in free time coincided with an increase in screen time for me. It kind of scaled with it. And so this is something I always tell parents of kids in high school or high school students themselves is, yeah, look at your screen time report, but
Mm,
also look at it in terms of how much free time you actually have, right? Because as that free time grows, it's very common for the screen time to scale with it. And you can see that on weekends and over holidays.
right.
But anyway, for me, it was that transition into college, the increase in free time, and also the increase in the just amount of stress and anxiousness and feelings of being overwhelmed and all the self-doubt that came from navigating this very difficult transition. It just led to my phone becoming this avoidant coping mechanism for all of that discomfort. And that really pulled me into a downward spiral where my tolerance for all forms of discomfort started to slowly chip away. And my dependence on my phone continued to increase until it got to the point where there really is no other word to describe it, but it was a full-blown addiction, and I saw it for what it was. I tried to change it for years. Nothing really seemed to stick, and I felt completely trapped in it for about the first 2.5 years of college.
So what were some of the attempts that you made? So 2.5 years, that's a long time to have this realization, really? Or did it take a while before you were like, "Oh, wow, this is a problem?" Like, at what point where you're like, "This is my phone?"
Yeah, there were a few major moments that stick out where I confronted the scale of the issue face to face. One of them was during my first semester. I had just stayed up until like 3 a.m. watching YouTube videos, and I woke up that next morning and my phone was dead because I literally didn't even plug it in. And I remember plugging it in and waiting for it to turn on. I had this kind of lull and moment of you know, boredom, no stimulus. And it really allowed me to step back and reflect on what a terrible choice was that I just made and that I had been making. I developed the habit of scrolling to fall asleep. And so that was a point where I realized, like, this is a change that I really need to make. It's getting in the way of things. And the solutions that I kept jumping to are, I think, what most people jump to, which is, oh, I'm going to set a time limit on it, right? I'm going to have Instagram tell me after I've been on it for 30 minutes. But those never really worked for me. You can always just click and say, give me 15 more minutes. So I got in the habit of doing that. And then I had another wake up call. This one was much harsher, actually. It was over spring break. I went home to visit my parents, and my mom was working probably the hardest I've ever seen anyone work. And she was the breadwinner for my family,
Hmm.
and she was in the middle of this project working literally over 100 hours a week. She was not sleeping full nights. She had no time to do anything that brought her joy. She was just at the computer all day long, super stressed out, but focused the whole time. And I remember being really struck by her ability to work that hard because at that point, it felt like I couldn't study for more than 10 minutes before getting distracted. And I asked myself this question, like, what is driving this woman to burn the midnight oil again and again and again? And I realized that so much of her motivation was supporting me. I'm an only child. She was helping me pay my way through college. And I saw the toll that that was taking on her. And she didn't fully understand how far I had fallen from the person that I was in high school, and I knew just how disappointed she would have been if she saw the difference between how she was showing up and how I was showing up.
Right.
So that was a pretty profound moment of guilt and shame, and a lot of self-criticism came with that, and I made this promise to myself to make these big changes. I deleted the apps off of my phone. I was like, "I'm done. I don't need Instagram. I don't need YouTube. I really need to buckle down and pull myself out of this hole I've dug myself into and make her proud." And that worked pretty well for about a week or 2,
Oh
but
gosh. That didn't last long, did
it
it?
didn't last long because, YouTube's got an app on your phone that's very addicting, but there's also a website that's one tab click away from whatever homework assignment you're working on, and Instagram is a useful tool. This is part of what you talked about is there's a social dynamic of feeling like you need to be on it. If all of your friends are on it, if you're connecting with people that way, so I re-downloaded it, and slowly that, big burst of motivation and that aha moment kinda just faded away, and I checked my screen time report a couple weeks later, and I was literally right back where I was before that huge moment of guilt, shame, self-criticism. So, then you get into this really interesting psychological state of you're so profoundly disappointed in yourself and frankly confused by the fact that even that amount of, motivation wasn't enough to change your behavior.
Mm.
You actually fall into this trap of not even wanting to try to change it because it's so painful to prove to yourself that you are incapable of change that it's actually easier to just avoid trying to change at all. Right? That was the conversation I was having with myself is like, I know this is a problem, but I've already tried to fix it and it didn't work. So why even try again? Because I don't need another data point for myself that I'm weak.
Right, and so you've given up to the point that you just feel like a failure, so what is
Yeah.
the point, right? You know? I can relate to that in some ways, going into that freshman year of college, that's a very challenging time for so many young adults, and I remember myself luckily, I didn't have a phone to go to, but feeling the same where, "Oh my gosh, I don't have the structure." I used to work while I went to school in high school. I had a
Mhm.
job, I was in sports, and so there was always something going on, and then you get to college, and there's more pressure, there's less structure, and even then I had a job, but still, I think, turning to alcohol for me was the thing that really sent me into a tailspin.
Yeah.
I would say that what's different there is in a way, it's easier to pull away from that because with
Mhm.
alcohol, at least, sometimes that's mostly showing up on the weekend and you get these long breaks where, okay, I got to get my together.
Yeah.
And luckily, I had a studious roommate as well, and I'm sure you'll touch on that, how this is done better with others versus alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But phone addiction is just more complicated just
Mhm.
because it's always there. It's always next to you. It's always in front of your face. It's that constant pull. So you hit this point in your life where, okay, I give up. What brought you out of that?
It was making just a huge change in my environment. So I got really lucky actually. While I was in school, I had this idea for it was a really bad startup idea, but I had a startup idea, and my friend Quinn and I tried to go after it. We built this kind of interactive academic planner for Berkeley students. Totally failed, didn't work for a number of reasons, but we got hooked up with a company based out of New York, and they actually offered to give us an internship and fly us out there. So we took a semester off of school to go work on the other side of the country. And I was initially supposed to actually go study abroad in New Zealand for that semester, but I realized that what I needed at that time was that structure in my life again. I needed to be held accountable to going into an office, to doing work that other people were expecting me to do.
Mhm.
And I used that shift as this catalyst for overhauling a number of habits in my life. And it's so much easier to do when you have a new living situation. You're surrounded by new people. Like all of the cues, environmental cues for the habits that I had in college were gone and they were replaced by new ones. So it was actually really, frankly, not that hard to change what I was doing on a daily basis because of that. It was a catalyst for me. And
Mhm.
in the same way that I spiraled down into phone addiction pretty quickly, I was actually able to come out of it relatively quickly as well, because you start to get these returns from getting good nights of sleep and doing work that you're proud of and going to the gym and exercising. Like it doesn't take long to feel this sense of momentum. And that catapulted me to really just the next year and a half in particular, through finishing that internship and going back to school and creating the course that turned into Project Reboot, I just felt like I had so much growth and momentum, and it felt natural to not be on my phone.
Right.
So that was the big pivotal point for me.
Yeah, it's like something gave you enough of a break that you were able to get yourself out of that state of hopelessness.
Yes.
Because I think when we are in that state, it's like you need something to take you out, right? Because it's just something you feel like you can't do on your own. So that was a structure and opportunity that opened that door, I would say,
Yeah.
to feeling different, to like, "Oh, wow, this is how I could feel. This is
Yeah.
the energy I could have." And like you said, just feeling more positive, I'm sure, and mental clarity. So when you were doing this internship, what were some positive changes or specific things that you recall were especially replacing your screen time?
I mean, the biggest one, honestly, is sleep. Like, I was chronically sleep deprived when I was in college because I had this habit of falling asleep while on my phone, and I also had a job that I would wake up early to go work at, so I was pretty consistently getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep, and just over time, you become like a walking zombie, you know? Your amount of willpower, critical thinking, all of that stuff just tanks when you're not getting especially REM sleep, so that was a huge one for me, was just fixing my sleep hygiene and shifting going to bed by scrolling to going to bed by reading, and especially actually reading boring books.
Put you right to sleep.
Because I learned the hard way that if you have like a I remember as a kid, I read Hunger Games and I stayed up until like 2, 3 AM because it was so compelling.
That's my daughter.
Yeah, exactly. I read like the nonfiction, the protein and veggies as opposed to the treat.
Whereas I'm a nerd, if I read science, that will keep me up, you know? It's just
Yeah, it gets
I
different
don't
for
know, it's
everybody.
different for everyone.
Yeah. So that was a huge one, and then also just exercise was massive as well.
Mhm.
Getting into a habit of moving my body and just the feeling that that brings of, I think, confidence and valuing yourself. So much again for me was it my phone addiction was tied up in me not feeling good about myself.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different triggers that lead to unintentional tech use. And one of my core ideas that I put forth to students is I don't actually think anyone is addicted to their phone. Right? I think we over index a lot on this particular device. I think the root of the issue is we get addicted to escaping discomfort by seeking distraction. And this just happens to be the shortest, easiest path to get out of feeling bored or stressed or anxious or criticizing yourself. So that's why most attempts to reduce screen time fail is because they're not solving the problem at its source, right? You delete the app and then you start over using another one. It becomes this game of whack-a-mole.
Right.
So you actually have to solve it at its root.
Mhm.
And that means addressing those underlying forms of discomfort.
Right.
And for me, the biggest one that would lead to the most scrolling was self-criticism, shame, guilt, just feeling bad about myself. When you make a promise to yourself and then you don't keep it, it's like you take a debit out of the bank account that is your self-esteem. And when you get to a certain point of you have broken promises you've made to yourself so many times, it's like your self-esteem goes into debt. And that's just a very psychologically bad place to be.
Right.
So once I kind of came out of that and, I moved to New York and made this big change, I don't actually think it needs to be that drastic. I think if I shifted my mindset and started just making very small, achievable, tiny steps to bring back my faith in my ability to do the things I was telling myself I would do, I could have gotten out of it at Berkeley. I just didn't see that path out,
Right.
right? Because I was misunderstanding the root of the problem.
Right. Well, if I could unpack that, I feel that phones have replaced emotional intelligence. It's like what I talked about in a previous episode. It was JOMO versus FOMO, joy of missing out versus fear of missing out. And I think that it's like you said, when you're feeling anxious, you're feeling depressed, you're confused about making a decision, go to your phone, go to your phone, go to your phone. And it's like we have no sense of that connection to ourself,
Yeah,
but we spend a lot of time up here. That critical mind keeps reeling. I call it the monkey mind, and it just keeps going, going, and then maybe we can escape it by going to our phone, and we don't realize that creates even more negativity, circulating through our mind and self-criticism, and it really doesn't provide what we really need.
yeah,
But I find that when we have that downtime that is typically uncomfortable for us and or boredom or whatever you wanna call it, it allows that space to really go within and ask those deeper questions of yourself. What do I really want? What's important to me? Or why am I feeling sad? Why am I feeling depressed? What's missing? It's like you said, it doesn't take much. For me,
yeah,
if my mind gets reeling or worried about something ahead, it's like it's time to go for a hike. It's time to get outside. Even if you could just walk outside for 10 minutes,
definitely.
there's something about just nature even that can quiet the mind. At least that's my big go-to.
I completely agree with that. I think there's a great analogy. I think it was Naval Ravikant that said this, but the case that he was making for meditation and other adjacent activities where you're allowing the mind to just kind of run or sit with it is that it's almost like you have this mental inbox, like your email inbox. And as you go through life and things happen to you, there's things that you need to sit with and process. It's like there's messages that come into that inbox. And if you're chronically consuming information or executing things, like you have the focused attention part of your mind turned on, and you're not making the space to go into that default mode network, that state of daydreaming, just allowing the mind to wander, you don't have the setting for that inbox to get processed. And so it fills up with all of these messages. And think about how it would feel if we left this podcast and you opened your phone and you had like 1,500 unread messages. What would be the feeling that would come into your body when you saw that? If it were messages from people, right?
Right.
Important stuff to consume, and you had over 1,000, for me at least, that would make me feel overwhelmed and anxious, right? And I think a very
Yes.
similar thing happens when we have this sense of, whoa, like there's so much that I haven't taken the time to sit with and unpack. My like mental inbox is overflowing. And that, I think, for me, led to this persistent low grade hum of anxiousness that became my new norm as a student because I never took time throughout the day to be alone with myself. That any moment of dullness or boredom became a trigger to consume information, whether it was scrolling social media or listening to a podcast or even music, I think can kind of crowd this out to a certain extent. So I couldn't agree more that developing the practice of giving your mind the space to just run and daydream is critically important for mental health and well-being.
Yeah. And it's not just mental health and well being. I mean, we're seeing a rise in irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, among
Mm,
kids. It's just getting out of
interesting.
control as anxiety and depression is increasing. So there really is a connection. And that's why those with more severe struggles like autism and ADHD, there's always these common symptoms of gastrointestinal issues. And so it's
Fascinating.
like we're exacerbating them with this anxiety created from technology.
Mm.
So, hence, why you're here today. So, I'd like to hear how Project Reboot really started for you.
So, funnily enough, tying back to our what we were just talking about, it was actually hiking.
Mm.
I was on a camping trip in Point Reyes, and my brain kinda had the space to wander, and at this point, I'm about a year and a half out of that move to New York. So COVID has hit. I'm back in California, but I was still working. That internship turned into a full-time job. And I was in so much better of a mental space. And it really just hit me how drastically my physiology, my mental health, my relationships, my sense of meaning and productivity, and all of these things had improved as a result of me improving my relationship with my phone. And there was so much that I had learned in that time about my own habits and the way that we interact with technology, and it just hit me like this light bulb moment of, "Wow, I should not have had to figure all of that out myself." I remembered how I felt for years. This was because there was something wrong with me, it was because I was weak, I had all the shame around it, and now I saw with clear eyes that that wasn't the case. It was me responding in a natural way to having this addictive technology sitting in my pocket. And I realized that I was actually in a really good position to help other people go through this reset of their relationship with technology that I had gone through. So, fortunately, Berkeley has this really interesting program called the DECAL program. It stands for Democratic Education at Cal.
Mm.
And it actually originated out of the free speech movement back in the 60s. But the short of it is, as an undergraduate student, you can teach a full semester length course for credit to other students. And all you have to do is get the sign off of a professor in a department. So I was like, whoa, I could create an entire semester length course about how to improve your relationship with technology and help my peers go through the same transformation. So that was the initial spark, was that would be a really meaningful project. It'd be a great way to close out my time at Berkeley during my senior year. So I started over the next few months kind of pulling together an outline of what that class could look like. And I ended up actually teaching that class 3 times. It was fascinating to me when I first created the course. I was really unsure if anyone would want to take it. Like, are Berkeley students gonna go out of their way to add extra units to their already busy schedule
Mhm.
to take this class about spending less time on their phone? Like, probably not. I expected maybe we'd get 5 or 10 applicants, and we needed to fill 17 seats to be allowed to run the course. I was super nervous. I literally had, like, a one of those, like, megaphone bullhorn things in my Amazon shopping cart at one point, like, ready to go and, like, shamelessly promote my course on Sproul Plaza.
Oh, you didn't have to.
Didn't have to do any of it. There were over 400 applications to the class
Wow.
that came in.
The first time you posted.
Over the course of the 3 times that I taught it, there was, like, 450. The first time I
Oh,
posted it, it was
wow.
over 100 that came in,
Wow.
just off
Yeah.
the rip, with literally just me putting the course on Berkeley's website, like, no other promotional efforts at all. And that was a huge wake-up call to me. I was like, "Wow, so many people are actually struggling with this."
Yes.
So, that was just a great opportunity to throw a bunch of things at a wall. I mean, I taught it 3 times, it was 12 weeks each time, so 36 class periods with over 100 students total over the course of the 3 semesters. I was able to just experiment and play with all these different methods for helping people understand the nature of the problem, solutions that they could actually implement, ways to create a community within the class that led to peer to peer accountability and bringing back the things that screens had been replacing. And each time I taught it, the results of the course got better. And over the course of the 3 semesters, the average student actually reduced their non productive screen time by 3.5 hours per day.
Wow.
And we had some students go from 7 hours to an hour and a half. We got all these incredible, testimonials of students saying, like, this fully changed my life. I got straight A's for the first time in college and still had time to actually hang out with my friends more than I ever had before taking this class. And it just became super clear to me that I was onto something with this. And there was just a burning desire to get the contents of that class out to more people
And that was just one semester, right? That the students were experiencing such great shifts in just one semester.
in just 12 weeks. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And honestly, the majority of the shifts, because the class was broken into two parts, it was reducing unintentional screen time and then getting more out of your devices and using them in a more productive, intentional way. So the screen time reduction actually came from the first 6 weeks of the class. And the cool thing was that that shift sustained for students even as we moved on to different topics. So yeah, it really gave me a lot of hope that this is an addressable problem. A lot went into that transformation, but the last 4 years since graduating have been me experimenting with how do you take those concepts, those actions that those students took, the community that we built, and make it accessible to a broader audience, especially of younger kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because I really believe if you can nip this problem in the bud and set them on the right path when they start using technology, it's a lot easier than having to address an already existing, crisis of tech addiction.
Oh, yeah, especially if you could I mean, I know you start with middle school, but even if you start with elementary school,
Mhm.
even so, middle school, just imagine the difference we would see in our kids growing up.
Yeah.
Mental health, how they spend their time, the connections they have with others. So I'm sure then this class at Berkeley totally inspired you to create this beyond college then. So how did that move forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a very organic way. I reached out to one of my old high schools that I went to as a student and got my first assembly gig to go and give basically a highlight reel of the best stuff from the 12 weeks in that class. And that talk was very different from the talks that I do now. I've since given over 300, probably over 400 now. I got a tally assemblies at schools, um, and just have iterated over time as I've figured out what students respond to, where their hesitancies are, what really resonates, what leads to behavior change. And it's just been this kind of continual iteration of not only the content that I bring to schools via assemblies, but the resources and other elements of the program that we've built on top of that to allow schools to undergo this shift from, it's the adults at the school, the teachers, the staff, the parents against the kids on this topic to it's the whole school community against addictive technology. And we're all kind of operating from the same understanding, using the same language, and working together to use this in an intentional way that adds value to our lives, where we have agency and we're making conscious choices for how we're interacting with these devices as opposed to just, chronic dependence and addiction.
And I do think that this needs to happen as a whole. It's like addressing it with the entire school system. That entire school is going to make a bigger difference because if it's just one person on their own trying to make these changes and everyone around them is oblivious to that it's an issue at all, it's like you're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah.
I mean, I can share quickly that my son, I don't know if he's okay with me sharing, but he was, a freshman at University of Utah, and he's just standing in line for food and looking at everyone just looking down at their phone. And you're a freshman, you're trying to get to know other students. And it's harder to get to know others when everyone's looking down on their phone or down on the table or sitting in a circle, everyone's down on their phone.
Mhm.
He tried to let go of all of his gaming, all of his social media platforms for a couple weeks, and he noticed himself like, "Gosh, I have more mental clarity.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like my mood's a little better." But like we were saying before, what he noticed is a lot of the conversation would be around, "Oh, did you see this on YouTube?" or "Check out this Instagram," or,
Yeah.
everything revolves around their phones, and it was hard to stay disconnected from all of those things that everyone else was connected to. So do you find that in your assemblies, a big emphasis is probably the culture of the school, right?
100%. Like, it is the final boss of this problem. You can give kids all of the education, build the awareness, make them fully clear on the consequences of the choices that they're making when they interact with technology. They can be the most educated people in the world about tech addictions and the consequences of over-consuming social media. But if you're fighting against the social incentives of the environment they're operating in, you're not gonna win.
Mhm.
Not with the teenager, right? If it's socially credited to seek out digital distraction, if you have Snapchat group chats that are going until 2 in the morning,
Right.
it's considered lame to not go home and play video games, and you have to pick between being chronically online and socially isolated, you're gonna pick to be chronically online.
Mhm.
That's the choice that the vast majority of teenagers will make. So there's a lot of unspoken norms and expectations that they have for each other, many of which have been consciously designed by these platforms, right?
Of
It's very
course.
interesting to look at how Snapchat in particular is set up and ask yourself, I wonder why they decided to design our interactions in this particular way. I wonder why it is that the first thing that you see when you open someone's Snapchat profile is what's their Snap score,
Right.
right? How many total messages have they sent and received? It's because it implies to you that it is better to be on Snapchat more. And if someone has 3 times as many sent and received Snapchats, you start thinking to yourself, whether consciously or unconsciously, "Whoa, thrice the amount of people wanna talk and connect with
I
them.
need to keep up.
I need to get on Snapchat more to, like, keep up with them," right? Same with Snap Streaks and the fact that you can pay to see who other people's best friends on Snapchat are, or if people have been online regardless of whether or not they've opened your message, it makes everyone feel like they have to respond to everything as soon as they go on the app, so then everyone else gets more Snapchats, so they keep coming back, like, so much of this has been consciously designed against kids' best interest, and now they're beholden to these norms and expectations that many of them haven't even verbally acknowledged with each other, they're just kind of unspoken, and that is really what needs to shift for them to be able to separate from this stuff. There needs to be a reduction in the pressure to be online, and there needs to be an increase in the access that they have to the things that screens have been replacing. Because if there's no alternative, right? If you get out of school, all of your friends are on Snapchat or playing video games, it's hard to do anything else, right? That's how they're all connecting with each other. So that's the shift that we need to see. I think we are starting to see it, especially at the college level now. We've done some really awesome work with student led clubs at schools like Berkeley and UCLA and UCSB. We've got a number of other ones that are starting in the fall where we have these really passionate student groups that are fighting to bring back these things that they felt were missing from their childhoods because of how they and all their friends use technology.
It's not only what you bring to these assemblies, but you've developed an app, correct? That students can use to track their time and help them be more aware of their cell phone use.
Yeah, it's enormously helpful. We actually didn't build it. We partnered with them. The app's called ClearSpace.
Mhm.
It was my tool of choice for improving my own relationship with technology for years before we developed a partnership with them.
Right.
And just so you know, it's not even a financial partnership. We actually built a curriculum that lives on their app, and in exchange, they made ClearSpace free for all students through the end of college. So we now have a resource that we can point everyone to. Doesn't feel like we're, like, selling anything to the students from the stage, that always feels weird, but it's been an awesome partnership because you need to have a call to action for a behavior change, after giving people this information. If it's education without action, the outcome of it is pretty minimal, right? Awareness isn't the constraint. Kids already know this is a problem.
Right.
They need to know what to do about it.
Exactly. It's like nutrition. We know we're supposed to eat more fruits and vegetables, and how come
Right.
we yeah, it's a matter of how do you apply this in your daily life, right?
Yeah, and I think what's awesome about ClearSpace, that there's 2 things that really set it apart from the other solutions that I've seen. The first is that it actually does help you solve the problem at its source, because one of its core features is when you set up ClearSpace to control your time on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook or whatever app, every time you go to open up one of those apps, it forces you to pause by default for 15 seconds to take a breath and ask yourself, do I actually want to use this right now? And what that does is it makes you more consciously aware of the reflexive opens that come from being bored, being stressed, whatever. So, in the curriculum that we built on the app, as you go through that pause, you identify, why did I just click this app? Was it with a conscious intent and purpose to do something specific? Or was it this reflexive, avoidant coping? And we talk about how to shift your response to those underlying triggers for scrolling, because that's actually what needs to happen for a sustainable change to occur. So that's one aspect of it I love.
Yeah, that if I could say that pause is amazing because you think about how once you click, a reel is going. It's got you hooked. It's like,
Yeah,
"Ooh, I gotta
exactly.
watch this." It's a cute puppy, like, this is it can be something
Yeah.
silly, but that's all it takes, and if you have that pause, it
Yep.
does help you just, "Oh, wait a minute, why did I do this?"
Yeah. No, it is unbelievably useful. It's really dramatically changed my relationship with my phone, having that in place every time I go to social media. The other aspect of it that I think is really useful is the way that they enforce the budgets that you create for yourself.
Mm.
So pretty much every screen time app, even if they claim to be the hardest block in the world, there's always a way around it. You can delete the app, you can jailbreak your phone, like, no. People get
Jailbreak.
crafty. We're raising the greatest generation of hackers the world has ever seen. Like, kids are
Ugh,
so good at getting around restrictions.
I bet.
So what ClearSpace did instead, I think, is really brilliant. If you break the intentions that you set for yourself, it texts a friend, and you can actually see how much time your friends spent on their phone in the prior day before your first session on a distracting app each day. So there's this kind of social accountability reinforcement mechanism to it that I just think is so useful, because it taps into the same underlying, psychology that social media apps are exploiting to get us to keep logging on and scrolling in the opposite direction to help you stick to the intentions that you set for yourself. So, yeah, it's been an awesome tool. I'm so glad we get to share it with students and give them access to it. And we see typically when we go to schools, we'll get about a 30 to 40% activation rate on ClearSpace with zero incentive. Like, we're not asking them to, there's no prize, there's no raffle, anything like that. It's just they do it of their own volition because they see it's an issue, and it's a genuinely useful uh, tool to help them wean off of it.
And I know that on another front, you're also educating parents because I think that all of us adults too are having issues with phone use.
For sure.
American adults are spending an average of 7 hours per day on screens, with 41% saying they're online constantly. And that was a report by the CDC. Like, so if these kids are trying to make changes and then their parents aren't even present, like, "What? Huh? Yeah? Huh?" Constantly looking on their phone or have their phones on the table. It's difficult then for kids to think, "Well, is this really important?"
Yep.
So what do you do, for parents? How do you find ways to get them involved and increase awareness at home?
It's such an important point, because not only are you modeling behavior, right, especially with younger kids, right? They are looking at how you're using technology and they're taking notes. But if you try to tell them this is how you should use it, and then not apply that same practice, it comes off to them as very frustrating, very hypocritical. I hear this from students all the time. So I do think that parents play a big role in helping students make these shifts. And fortunately, like, the method for improving your relationship with technology is fairly age agnostic, right? Solving that kind of underlying problem of uh, weeding out the avoidant coping, having some element of social accountability, adding friction to getting access to social media apps, bringing back the things that screens have been replacing, finding more authentic ways to meet your need for connection and play and leisure time. All those tools are universally applicable, I believe. I basically give the same material to parents as I do to students. And I think that's great because it gives everyone, again, common things that they can reference, a common frame to look at this issue through. I do talk with them a lot about how to navigate the dynamics of these conversations with kids. And the biggest takeaway that I have is you want to make sure this isn't me versus you, it's us versus addictive technology. Right. I think a lot of parents don't recognize the level of awareness that their kids have about the fact that this is an issue. I ask parents when I go speak at high schools, if we were to anonymously poll the students here and we were to ask them, do you feel addicted to your phone? What percentage do you think would say yes? And I have a lot of parents say like 10 to 20%,
Mm,
right? Like they don't see it's an issue. They don't recognize this as a problem. At the average high school, 70% of kids will tell you, I am addicted to my phone.
wow.
I did this at a middle school, 60% of the students said yes. That's 11 to 13-year-olds, right? They know. They're aware it's a problem. If your phone is using you and you are not using it, you probably have some semblance of understanding that's what's happening. I think what parents perceive as denial or a lack of awareness is really just a mask for shame and self-criticism, and a lot of kids are beating themselves up about the fact that they're procrastinating on homework or staying up late at night and, scrolling until 1 AM. So I think parents really need to come in with a lot of empathy into these conversations, and as opposed to being a judge that just imposes rules without getting their buy-in, being a guide, a coach, right, that helps them figure out what their ideal relationship with technology is and then holds them accountable to it. Because I've asked over 60,000 students now, how do you want to spend your remaining free time? We look at that dots graphic
Mhm.
and I show them before I fill in, the 312 months of screen time that the average 18-year-old's on pace for. I show them 334 months. How do you want to spend it? Literally not one student has said anything related to social media. Not once. They say the same things that parents do. They say hanging out with people they care about, being outside, pursuing their passions, making a difference. No one says social media. That's not how they actually want to spend their time. So I think parents that there's a lot more room to work with them than we often realize, but we have to give them a seat at the table in this conversation and help them figure out their ideal relationship with it, not necessarily impose that on them without their, you know, consent or buy-in.
Right, right. I think it's just a matter of I know often what I do is even just share my own struggles, like, "Oh my gosh, I just lost time,"
Yeah.
because I mean, here's an example. I'll need to do some research, right, on Instagram or look at something, check my social media, and when you open it, it's like something else shows up, and the next thing you know, I've spent 5 to 10 minutes just before I realized, what am I doing? Why did I just oh, wait, I was checking my social media, and here I am watching these reels on Boston Terriers." So it just sends you down a rabbit hole. So even for those of us that have that awareness, it can still pull you in. So having those kind of discussions, or we talk about having an evening without screen time. "Hey, could we at least do a game night once a week?" And sometimes like, "Oh, I don't feel like playing cards." But it's like, "Let's just do it." And then sure enough, once we get started, it's like, "Oh, that was so much fun."
Mhm.
Because we're such creatures of habit and we feel like, "Oh, I've just had a long day. I just wanna zone out in front of the TV." And it's not saying you're never gonna do that, but it's always our go-to. And then we miss out on those fun evenings of bantering with each other and, playing a board game and or having deeper discussions. You really miss so many great opportunities for deeper conversation and connection with your kids.
100%.
You really do have to be intentional about how you're spending your time, like you said, and remember why it matters. So, moving on from this great program that you have going, another movement that I've seen that is positive is these digital detox events.
Mhm.
And I think it is because a lot of families and youth are really wanting this. They want a complete break from their phones. Have you found this to be an important part of your life or things that you talk about? I know for our family, backpacking is our way to just get away from everything and get a complete break from society, be out in nature. But what would you say to our listeners about that, about fitting in those digital detox periods of time and how that makes a bigger difference?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's a huge part of the solution here. Sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of an over index that people have on, oh, I'm going to do like 1 week off social media and that's going to, change my relationship with it forever. That in and of itself will not lead to long term behavior change, but it will do a number of positive things, especially if you do a detox in a way that brings about the things that your brain is trying to get from social media in a more authentic way, right? I think it's important to recognize that the whole reason we get dopamine from social media, the reason our brains find it rewarding is mostly because it tricks us into feeling connected as it isolates us. That is at its core why our brains are so drawn to it. And it's been interesting as it's transitioned from being social media to being anti-social media, where the majority of content that you're looking at is not from people that you actually know. It's influencers that have actually figured out if I talk right into this camera, so it looks like to you that we are having a conversation right now.
Mhm.
And there's a back and forth, there's a relationship being built. Your brain will respond to that in a positive way, especially if you think that I'm funny or relatable or attractive or whatever it is, as many of these influencers are. So it's kind of like candy for connection in that sense, right? It's this
Mhm.
fake version that tricks your brain. And in the same way that if someone were struggling with their diet, overeating sweets, you wouldn't say stop eating. You would say bring back real food, right? And if you eat a real dinner, you're less likely to binge and consume
Right.
on sweets after the fact because you've actually had the fiber and the nutrients that make your digestive system feel satisfied.
Yeah, you're meeting the true needs of the body.
Exactly. And so digital detox, yes, but in a way that meets those underlying needs that technology is pretending to meet.
Mhm.
That's the key. You have to start to reintroduce authentic connection and reflection and play and more active forms of leisure. And it can be a great catalyzing event for that. It can also really be a clarifying tool to show you what aspects of social media are valuable to you and which ones you don't care about and aren't going to miss. And for me, this combination of taking these periodic breaks from it, where I go off for a week, I go on a backpacking trip, or I just delete it from my phone for a little while, it reintroduces me to what aspects of it I actually care about. And one of the nice things about using an app like ClearSpace, where every time I go on to Instagram, it's on a 10-minute timer and I know I'm going to get kicked off, is I prioritize the aspects of it that I actually care about, right? I want to respond to the messages and send people things or make a post or use it in a more active, intentional way. So I think it can be a very helpful tool for that. I do think digital detoxes can be really
Mhm.
useful, um, especially if there's an element of like community and connection around it.
And we have one of those in our community, is Poway Backpackers, and my son and daughter had been backpacking with that group, and they bring, high schoolers together backpacking in the Sierras and getting a complete break from their phones, and, they just notice those deeper conversations, and no matter what type of person you are, everyone connects with everyone. And I know your most recent trip I heard was Patagonia, which sounds
Mhm.
pretty incredible.
Yeah, that was about as good of a digital detox as you can possibly get. It was like
Absolutely.
1 week totally unplugged. I actually had a friend that got married in Santiago, Chile. His wife is Chilean, and they did a super unique thing. Their honeymoon was a 16-person backpacking trip in Patagonia, which I thought was so cool. So it was, all of their best friends from all over the world. And yeah, exactly as you're saying, when you're completely disconnected, you only see people for what they are, and it's natural to connect. We're innately drawn to connecting with each other, and it's terrible that technology can get in the way of that in the way that it does, especially for younger kids when they really need to be developing that ability to connect with each other and those lifelong relationships that stick with them and serve them for decades to come.
Absolutely. For students listening now,
Mhm.
um, if they wanted to start improving their digital habits this week,
Yeah.
um, what are 3 practical steps you'd recommend?
Great question. Well, we did pull together like a 9-day micro learning curriculum exactly about this. So the idea was to take all the most useful things that the kids did in that Berkeley course and turn them into 2 to 5 minute small daily action steps. And that actually lives on the ClearSpace app. So if you go onto ClearSpace and you make an account, you tell ClearSpace you're a student, you'll get a free account with access to it, and you'll see in the challenges section the Project Reboot Challenge,
That's awesome.
and it is our, like, most comprehensive set of recommendations. If for whatever reason that's not the right next step, I'll share some of the kind of highlights and easiest wins from that. Moving your phone charger, if it's right next to your bed, to the other side of the room, or ideally a different room completely, and getting an alarm clock is probably the simplest, highest leverage thing that you can do. Protecting your sleep is so important, and not only do phones impact the amount and the quality of the sleep that you get, you're most vulnerable to falling down a rabbit hole when you're super fatigued, right? So it's just this kind of perfect storm of that's such a problematic um, time for people. Lying in bed and scrolling to fall asleep, I think it has so many downstream impacts. So that would be one super easy change to make. The other one is getting an accountability partner and opening up to a friend. If you're struggling with this, chances are they're struggling with it too. Share your screen time reports with each other on a weekly basis. And finally, don't just try to solve this problem through reduction of screen time, elimination of bad behaviors. Proactively sub in positive behaviors, right? Think about when I am feeling stressed, when I am feeling bored, what could I do that would be a more positive response to that? And there's so many different things available. Right now, I'm doing this challenge where I'm replacing scrolling for 30 days with juggling. And it has been awesome. I love juggling so much now. It's such a fun, simple, like tangible thing to do. It's very satisfying. You get to see yourself progress really quickly. And I leave it and I feel refreshed and energized, whereas I leave a scrolling session and I feel drained, like I've taken an anti-nap almost.
Mhm.
Uh, so thinking more proactively about replacements for scrolling in response to those underlying triggers is a huge part of the solution, I think,
Yes. Well, thank you for those takeaways. But I think most importantly, and I want to reiterate it, is this goes a lot further when they're doing it as a campus.
for sure.
So how
Yeah.
can listeners find out more about you? How
Mhm.
could they get you and Project Reboot onto their campus?
Yeah, great question. So our website is projectreboot.school. It's a little bit of an unconventional domain, but .school at the end. And you'll see all of our information and resources on there. We're currently planning out the 26-27 school year. I would love to come and speak in your community. That's really the best way to kind of kickstart the program. After that talk, most schools will start a Project Reboot Club or install a representative into their student body. And those student leaders get access to our whole network of Project Reboot leaders. We have over 200 students now that are actively involved at the college and high school level. So we're trying to build this big community of people in our generation that are helping to take back our time. So yeah, go check out projectreboot.school. And most of the work that we do with schools comes from students or parents reaching out to the school and advocating to bring this program to campus. I'm glad there's so much momentum around addressing the problem in schools right now, but most of that is through restriction and phone policies, which I think can be useful, but really need to be supplemented with something that complements um, those rules with culture change and behavior change, not just on campus, but off campus as well.
what I want people to realize too is when you do an assembly that you're planting a huge seed because like it said, you're starting a culture.
Yeah.
It's not just an assembly. It's bringing everyone together. It's teaching them this app. It's helping them, create these clubs that go on year after year after year.
Yeah.
I just think that this is such an essential part of the curriculum that you've developed that kids would benefit from
Yeah.
for a lifetime.
Thank you.
So I really, really thank you for sharing your story today and everything about Project Reboot. I'm definitely going to keep my boots on the ground and get you out here in Poway Unified in my area. I do really appreciate what you do and keep up this incredible work.
Thanks so much, Norma. That means a lot. Really appreciate you bringing me on. It was a super fun conversation and looking forward to staying in touch.
Have a great day.
You too.
Wow. I think Dino is really hitting on what most of us feel today, that we really do long for a break from technology, yet it keeps pulling us back. I think that his program, Project Reboot, offers the solution that our kids need today and along with adults. Check out information on Project Reboot in my show notes. And if you're only listening, please head on over to my YouTube channel. And there you can leave a comment, share, subscribe to get this information out there. Until next time, be well.